And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so grateful to be invited here today to share with you the experiences of food costs, food access, and climate change from people living in remote areas of BC. And before we formally get started, we wanted to take some time to introduce ourselves and where we're calling in from. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Laurin Moro, and I'm a member of the Wikwemikong Unceded Territory in Odawa-Minis, in what is today known as Manitoulin Island in Ontario. I am currently a Master's of Public Health student at Brock University, and I'm completing my practicum with the BC Centre for Disease Control with their food security team and their healthy eating team. And I want to acknowledge with gratitude and respect that I'm calling in from the traditional territory the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples in present-day Niagara Falls in Ontario. I can pass it over to Janelle to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Laurin. I'm so excited to be here today to speak to everyone about this project that the food security team has been working on for over 2 years now. So my name is Janelle Hatch. And as mentioned, I work with the BC CDC as lead for food security. My ancestry is mainly French and English, and I'm a white settler joining today from where I live and work on the lands of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, today known as the Songhees and Esquimalt nations, and colonially known as Victoria, British Columbia. And I acknowledge with gratitude the stewardship of these lands by the First Peoples since time out of mind, and the continued stewardship of these lands by these peoples today. So as we move on now with our presentation, we wanted to first invite you all to join us in Menti. So if you haven't used Menti before, you can join us in one of two ways. So you can scan the QR code that you see here on the slide, or you can go directly to menti.com and enter the code that you see here on the screen. And we'll be starting out with a question and having a couple of other questions throughout our time together today on Menti. So please do take a moment now. We'll give you just 1 minute to sign into Menti, and you should be seeing, hopefully soon, the first question popping up. We're just really interested to know where everyone is joining from today. So just curious if you want to enter where you're joining in from today, the province or territory, that would be appreciated. And I'll just go here to the next slide. Okay, so we have some numbers popping up here. And as expected, there's quite a contingent from British Columbia. And also a large number from Ontario joining us today. And then representation from Alberta and Saskatchewan, it looks like, from Northwest Territories as well. So yeah, welcome everyone. Great to have you with us today. And now I'll pass it back over to Laurin to launch into the presentation on our project.
Thanks, Janelle. First, we wanted to express gratitude to our participating communities. And throughout this presentation, I am going to try and pronounce the traditional names. But if there is someone who does know the proper pronunciation, I welcome the feedback and am excited to learn. So the 8 communities that participated are outlined on this map. They include Atlin, Seike Dene, Hudson's Hope, Deidwa Denu First Nation, Onegwatine First Nation, Southern Statliam communities, Tossis, and Boston Bar. Additionally, we'd like to acknowledge the many members of our project contract team, which include Rebecca, Julia, and Michael, the Project Advisory Committee for their ongoing contributions and guidance for this project, and Mo Butterfly for the beautiful illustrations he made based on the themes in each story. We would also like to acknowledge the knowledge translation team at BCCDC, who helped develop and design the project report and website. We wanted to open it up by sharing some of our promotional content, but unfortunately the video wasn't working too great. So now we have a still image on the right that I'd like to point out to you, and this was made by Jared Quistenahan Williams for the Food Costing Stories report and website. He made multiple videos, and this is just one of them. He also sat as a member of our project advisory committee. Every few years, the BC Centre for Disease Control releases a food costing report to assess the affordability of healthy eating in British Columbia. However, it does not capture the lived experiences and food costs for people living in remote communities, as many of them do not have a full-service grocery store required to do the costing. This project was established in response to requests to gain a better understanding of the food costs and climate change impacts on food for people living in remote areas of BC. It aimed to identify food security challenges and opportunities to address them. The deliverables of this project include a report, a key considerations document that's internal to government, and a website to exemplify the voices of individuals living in remote areas of BC. Throughout this project, the project consulting team strived to create a safe, inclusive, and collaborative environment that simultaneously supported the needs of participants, the project advisory group members, the BC CDC food security team, and the overall project goals. To ensure this, the project was guided by 6 principles, and they include collaboration, equity and inclusion, well-being, respect, confidentiality, and validation. In addition to these guiding principles, the project prioritized the First Nations principles of ownership, control, access, and possession within the work to promote data sovereignty and self-determination of the individuals and communities participating in the story-focused project. To honor the OCAP principles, each participating community is seen as the keepers of their own story. Ownership and control are maintained by the communities being the first and the final reviewers during the writing stage, having a final say in the publication of their story, and having the right to request removal of their story or changes to their story on the BCCDC website. This project set out to hear stories and experiences of food access, availability, and affordability, and the impact of food change on climate change on food with remote Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities. These communities were engaged and identified through a call for interest approach. Conversations were held with knowledge keepers and community members as the primary method of story gathering. The conversations were one-on-one or small group between community members and a project consulting team member or subcontractor. 8 communities were engaged in 2022, and the report incorporated insights and direct quotes from all 8 communities. However, there was not enough information to create a full story on one of the particular locations, and as a result, 7 community stories were created and developed to illustrate the unique experiences and context of each remote community. It is important to note that although there have been 7 stories created, there are only 6 stories posted on our website, and this decision was made out of respect for the OCAP principles, as we're still waiting for final approval from one of our communities before making the story publicly available. There were 5 overarching themes and 13 sub-themes that emerged from the common experiences. The first was related to food costs and the effort of accessing food, and 4 sub-themes under this included food costs and affordability, transportation and travel costs, planning and effort to access food, and limited income and high cost of living. The next overarching theme was food availability and preservation. This included the importance of traditional and local foods, the limited selection and quality, and food preservation, storage, and equipment. Another theme from the stories was the unpredictability of a changing climate. This included climate change impacts on food, as well as weather events and conditions. The next theme was related to community leadership and food programs, and this included volunteerism and giving back to the community, as well as food banks and charitable food programs. The last theme was impacts on community health and well-being, and this included the lasting impacts from the COVID-19 pandemic. And now we're going to move into the 6 stories. We would like to make a note and bring your attention to the illustrations from here on out. Mo Butterfly kindly created these based on the many themes in the stories and from what he heard. The first story is from Southern Statliam. Southern Statliam Territory is home to several First Nations communities located along the Lillooet River via the Inshuk Forest Service Road. The region is known for its rich natural beauty, including forests, lakes, the Lillooet River, natural hot springs, and cold pools which attract tourists in the warmer months. Larger surrounding communities include Pemberton, Whistler, and Squamish, which are all 1 to 2.5 hours away. It takes an additional 1 hour and 30 minutes when driving from Typella, making it a grueling journey for residents, as there's no longer a southern exit for the Forest Service Road. This story includes 5 communities from 3 different nations. They include the Sachteen and Baptiste, which is part of the Semaquam Nation, Skookumchuck, part of the Skatine First Nation, and Typella and Port Douglas, part of the Hawkshaw Douglas First Nation. These communities and people are culturally connected, sharing common hopes for the future. 5 sub-themes that were present within the Southern Statliam stories include transportation and travel costs, planning and effort to access food, climate change impacts on food access, traditional and local foods, and volunteerism and giving back to the community. Pemberton is the closest large-scale grocery store to the Southern Statliam communities, and some residents may drive further distances to larger cities where they can get more groceries for their money at shopping centers like your independent grocer supermarket or Costco. However, there are additional costs associated with traveling further for food, as described with the quote on the screen. Efficient planning is essential to make the most of people's time and money. Most grocery shopping trips take a full day, especially for those in Typella and Port Douglas, and Dan describes the journey with the quote on the screen. For those who do not drive or own a vehicle, accessing food is an even greater challenge, and they feel dependent on others. Residents estimate that only 1/3 of community members have a driver's license, and thus the non-drivers must plan accordingly to stock their pantry food in case fresh food runs out. Lately, the region has been experiencing more severe rainstorms and washouts. The atmospheric river of November 2021 led to the most destructive washouts the area has experienced in years, as highlighted with the quote on the screen. This event caused devastating washouts along the Forest Service Road and other community roads, disrupting connectivity between the 5 communities and their shopping destinations. Some of Southern Statliam's residents recall going on hunting trips up the territory's mountains, where they would find plenty of deer, grouse, and other wildlife to bring home to butcher and prepare meals for or storage. They would share pieces of meat with as many households as they could. Traditional foods are a vital part of the food supply chain and culture of people living in remote communities, especially for Indigenous communities, which is highlighted on the screen. Traditionally, members of Southern Statliam did not take more than they needed, and if they had excess food, it was usually gifted or traded, as highlighted by Dan. The gifting and sharing of traditional foods are important ways to ensure that everyone in the community has enough to eat and is taken care of, especially for those in the community who do not or cannot hunt or forage themselves. The second story is from the Seke Dene community. Seikei Dene, meaning people of the mountains, is a Sakani nation located in BC's northern interior region. The community is approximately 530 kilometers north of Prince George and 350 kilometers north of the nearest grocery store located in Mackenzie. The community is surrounded by wilderness, offering wildlife, river valleys, and vast mountain ranges, creating breathtaking landscapes and scenery. To better understand the distance individuals of the Seikei Dene community travel to access market foods, this screen capture was taken with Google Maps during the winter months. Today, if you were to search the time it takes from Seikei Dene to Prince George, Google Maps would likely tell you that driving time is 9 hours and 43 minutes. This shows the differences in driving time with changes in the seasons and the road conditions. The 4 sub-themes that were present within the Seikei Dene story included limited selection and quality of food, the cost and effort of accessing food, climate change impacts on traditional food access, and weather events and conditions. There is one community grocery store which is owned by the Seikei Dene Nation. The store offers a variety of non-perishable foods, some meat, pre-made foods, and other supplies. Sherol, Samantha, and Faith shared their experiences with the lack of healthy food at the community store with the quote on the screen. The lack of healthy food at this store makes it challenging to cook nutritious foods, particularly for vulnerable groups like those with chronic disease, people experiencing mental health recovery, and elders at the Elder Center. Community members in Seikei Dene are the most remote of all participating communities and experience some of the highest travel costs to access food. These costs are described with a quote on the screen, and with a driving time varying between 8 to 12 hours to Prince George and 6 hours to Mackenzie, these costs add up quickly. In some cases, an overnight stay may also be required due to the travel time, which also adds an additional accommodation expense. A changing climate is a major worry for many members of the Seikei Dene community and is expressed with the quote. Some community members have observed substantial changes to the availability and quality of local berries and medicinal plants throughout their lifetime. These changes also impact wild animals. As the local plants are limited, wild animals are unable to obtain their nutrition and may move away from the region, making hunting more challenging. Fish populations have also decreased over time due to changes in the climate. Elizabeth describes the challenges with traveling to Mackenzie or Prince George to shop for food with the quote on the screen. The journey to Mackenzie or Prince George presents challenges as people must share the road with large industrial vehicles. Limited visibility is also often a concern due to dust during the summer and fall months, or whiteout conditions during the winter. Our third story is from Boston Bar. Boston Bar is located in the traditional Inclacatma territory in the Fraser Canyon along Highway 1. It is halfway between Lytton and Yale along the Fraser River. This area was originally an indigenous village called Kyome on the west bank of the Fraser River. This area had active forestry and mill industries, but the community has faced challenges after the sawmill closed in 2019. The area is still visited by tourists traveling along the Trans-Canada Highway as the gateway to the Fraser Canyon. Today, the community has about 190 residents and approximately 500 people living in the area, including North Bend and Batruth, the nearest First Nations community. The nearest grocery store is in Hope, which is a 45-minute drive or 65 kilometers from Boston Bar. The food in Hope are often limited, so many residents choose to travel further to Chilliwack, which is 117 kilometers away, because they have larger supermarkets such as Superstore and Walmart. Three sub-themes that emerged in this story related to weather events and conditions, cost and effort of accessing food, and volunteerism and giving back to the community. Residents share concerns over climate change and weather events on locally grown foods and traditional food sources, which can be seen with the quote on the screen. In late June 2021, an extreme heat dome occurred throughout a significant portion of Western North America, resulting in forest fires across BC. In November of that year, an atmospheric river brought significant flooding in the area and caused multiple washouts and rockslide that damaged the road infrastructure. Boston Bar has no local grocery store, and accessing food requires significant effort and money, as MD describes on the screen. Gas stations and convenience stores sell convenience items and some food, but according to residents, the quality is poor. Basic staple food items like milk, bread, eggs, and others are significantly more expensive than at a grocery store. Many foods are molded, squashed, bruised, rotten, or past their best before days. Volunteers play an important role in Boston Bar, which is outlined with the quote on the screen. In times of responding to extreme weather events and emergencies, the community tirelessly collected donations and planned for the delivery of essential items, sometimes working for up to 20 hours a day. Since the flooding cut off road access, food and medications had to be delivered by helicopter. The Boston Bar Food Bank is a key resource for folks in the community. It is a valued service to the residents, with 80 to 90% of the community using the food banks to supplement their food supplies. The food bank is volunteer-led, but struggles to find enough volunteers to maintain operations. And now is when we're going to ask you to go back on the Menti. We'll give you a few minutes. And for our second question, from the first three stories, which sub-themes or themes were most prominent to you?
Just giving a little extra time on this one. Okay. Now let's jump ahead here. Laurin, did you want to go through some of those? That's a great variety of answers.
So from the beginning, I'm seeing a lot of access and lack of access, and then the lack of resources. Boston Bar stood out a lot, and that is probably with all the climate change that has been happening there. The distance, yes, distance is a huge thing, especially for remote communities. And on my screen, I'm scrolling down. So there's also just lack of healthy foods in the area, stress and effort to buy market foods, transportation challenges, travel distances, Indigenous communities are at a disadvantage, somebody said, extreme weather events, yes, climate disasters, lack of gardens, lack of resources. These are all great. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for participating. So thank you so much, Laurin. I'm now going to go into the next three stories to share with you today. So this next story is a story of Hudson's Hope. So the community of Hudson's Hope is located on the banks of the Peace River in the Rocky Mountain foothills of northeastern BC on unceded Treaty 8 territory. The area is home to a variety of wildlife, including moose, bear, and deer. Hudson's Hope is located between Chetwynd, 60 kilometers to the south, and Fort St. John, over 80 kilometers to the north. Hudson's Hope is home to about 850 year-round residents, but this fluctuates with industry workers and a transient workforce. The community has experienced a population decline since the 1960s, when many workers from the construction of hydroelectric dams in the area lived in the community. Today, hydroelectricity production is still a main source of employment in the area, as evidenced by the current development of a new dam. Forestry, agriculture, and oil and gas are also booming industries in the region. Hudson's Hope has a small but strong Métis population, and traditional food practices are highly valued and can be seen in the food culture of the community. So these were some of the themes that came forward from this story. So cost and effort of accessing food, climate change impacts on food access, food banks and charitable food programs, and volunteerism and giving back to the community. To start with cost and effort of accessing food, Hudson's Hope is challenged by a limited selection and high costs of food within the community. To access lower prices and a better selection, many residents do choose to travel the almost hour-and-a-half journey to Fort St. John every 2 weeks to a month. The trip to Fort St. John can be expensive or impossible for Hudson's Hope community members who cannot afford to stock up and spend the $500 to $1,000 at one time. Another community member said, so they're sort of stuck buying the groceries here in town, and it really hurts their pocketbook because you're on a fixed income. So that's the experience shared by some community members. Next, looking at climate change impacts on food access. Like many other rural and remote communities across the province, Hudson's Hope is grappling with the disruptive impacts of recent weather events on access to local and traditional foods. So last year, the community was evacuated due to a major wildfire in the area, and that resulted in an evacuation for about a week. Sweltering summer heat makes going outside difficult, and water restrictions limits gardening as well. Two community members described the community programs, connections, and people working to improve food availability and access. So over time, more and more individuals are accessing a local food bank that's operated by Friends of Hudson's Hope. Joan described the use of the food bank here in the quote on the screen. Volunteerism and giving back to the community. Métis identity is heavily connected with food and land. Sharing, gathering, and connecting over food is an integral part of the culture. A participant who took part in the Métis Nation BC survey shared this quote on the screen. Our next community here is Atlin. So the town of Atlin is situated in the far northwest of BC on the shores of Atlin Lake, the largest natural lake in the province. Atlin is the Tlingit place name for big water and is on the traditional lands of the Teku River Tlingit First Nation. Located in a wide valley, it is surrounded by snow-capped mountains, forests, and waters. It is home to many types of animals, including moose, caribou, sheep, bear, and salmon. Atlin is only accessible by road via the Yukon and is located 175 kilometers south of Whitehorse, the closest city center. 400 to 500 residents call Atlin home year-round, and in the summer, the population can see a large influx from summer residents and recreational visitors, looking to camp, fish, and hunt. Here are some of the themes that came forward from this story. So food costs and availability, transportation and travel costs, traditional and local foods, and food preservation, storage, and equipment. Atlin is served by 2 small grocery stores offering produce, meats, and other foods. Supplies are brought into the community via transport truck on a weekly basis, usually traveling from Alberta. Transportation is limited to just one road in from the Yukon. If a weekly delivery is missed, the community goes without. This can happen when there's severe weather, washouts, or slides occurring along local road or elsewhere along the route along the Alaska Highway, or if there are shortages of truck drivers. Transportation and travel costs. Many community members choose to embark on a 4 to 6 hour round trip journey to Whitehorse for better selection, cheaper prices, and to buy in bulk. Getting to Whitehorse takes significant time and energy. Unreliable weather and road conditions complicate the shopping, especially during winter months. The cost of fuel is also an added burden, and those without a reliable vehicle may have added challenges. Now to speak to traditional and local foods. So Atlin community members rely on hunting, fishing, and harvesting to provide access to local food from the land and local lakes and rivers. Residents described the significant role seasonal harvesting plays in their access to fresh food, alongside growing food in their own gardens. Gardens play an important role in northern communities like Atlin. Food preservation, storage, and equipment. So this really speaks to the need for freezers, root cellars, and other food storage tools and options when purchasing food in bulk and when preparing local foods for the winter months. Reliance on fridges and freezers can become a challenge with power outages causing food to spoil. This is the last community to highlight for you. This is Tassis, the community of Tassis. Jumping down to southern BC now. The village of Tassis is in Nootka Sound on Vancouver Island's west coast at the head of Tassis Inlet's North Arrow, tucked in the mountains on the traditional territory of the Mauchalat and Muchalat First Nation. It has stunning ocean and forest scenery. Tassis is located 154 kilometers or a 2 to 3 hour drive from Campbell River and 66 kilometers from Gold River. The scenic road between Tassis and Gold River is named the Tree to Sea Drive, but it also can be dangerous and unpredictable. These are some of the themes that came forward in this story. So cost and effort to access food, again, climate change impacts, health and well-being considerations, as well as volunteerism and giving back in the community. There is one local store in Tassis that sells groceries, but most Tassis residents go for food shopping to Campbell River to shop at larger supermarkets that have more variety, availability, bulk purchasing options, and lower prices. Most residents only make this trip once per month, as food and fuel costs can add up to about $1,000 or more per trip. Road and weather conditions can be challenging and sometimes unsafe. Trevor describes the day-long trip in the quote that you see on your screen. So climate change. Hunting and fishing provide seasonal access to food from land and sea, but it can be cost prohibitive as well. So hunting requires vehicle maintenance, fuel, firearm licensing and purchasing, ammunition, a permit, and more. So, and during summer, offshore fishing is restricted in the area, so access to a boat is required. Climate change and commercial activities, especially logging, have significantly impacted local gathering, hunting, and fishing in the area. So here's a quote related to health and well-being considerations. So people find that getting enough nutritious food is difficult, especially in the wintertime. So once fresh perishable foods are eaten, mostly non-perishable foods remain for the rest of the month when people are just doing a big shop once per month. And volunteerism in the community. Tassos residents without vehicle access rely on friends and neighbors to collect groceries from Campbell River and help with other errands. Some people struggle with receiving these types of favors and feel like a burden to others. Teamwork and volunteerism keep this community going. The people are generous, kind, and caring. However, volunteers can experience burnout, leading to gaps in volunteer-run services and supports in the community. Travel and transportation costs. So road and weather conditions can be challenging and sometimes unsafe. So erosion and narrowing of sections of the 75-kilometer gravel logging road called Head Bay Road creates steep drop-off cliffs along the roadside. The trip requires a reliable vehicle, good tires, and a good deal of planning ahead. Many people pack chains, jumper cables, blankets, and emergency supplies. Some bring chainsaws in case a fallen tree blocks their way, and flat tires and breaking down are common worries. One resident spoke to this in the quote on the screen. This now comes to the end of our stories that we have to share with you today. And we have one more Menti to reflect on these last 3 stories that I shared with you. So if you want to jump back onto menti.com for this last question, that would be appreciated. And again, it's asking a similar question to the last one, but focused on these last 3 stories and what stood out for you in these ones. So we'll just give you a moment to answer this question, and then I'll jump to the next slide. Okay. So here we have some of the responses that have come in on this question. So thank you so much. And Laurin, I might ask you to jump into because I can't quite figure out how to scroll down on my screen here. But yeah, so some of the ones that I can see here, dangerous roads, absolutely. Climate change impacts, really the community support is coming through in some of these stories for sure. The costs associated with accessing food. And I like that one, desire to access foods from the land, absolutely. And then looking at the cost of that. Oh, I can just scroll down. Look at that. Okay, and more about food costs and access. Challenges posed by the environment. Yes, so all of the changes that we're seeing in weather patterns and related to climate change. Unpredictable, dangerous and unpredictable travel. Absolutely. So lots of comments related to that. and then health and safety. Yeah, so thank you so much. These are all fantastic responses. Really appreciate your contributions here. Now we would like to open it up to your questions. So we'd like to take about 10 minutes or so and see if there are any questions that have come through in the chat.